Welcome back, everybody. Here we go. We're going to start getting into developmental psychology a little bit. But one of the things that we need to do before you start talking about like actual human development is we need to understand how research is done in development. Okay, so let's take a look at different ways that researchers can look at human development. Okay, so while this is funny and cheeky, this isn't exactly how it's done, but we can get into this and we'll see how things like longitudinal study over a long time fits into this and makes it, more funny. So we can take a look at this, right? Age, cohort, and time measurement effects. So you've got your cohort. A cohort is a group, basically, right? So when you go to school, perhaps, and you're in a marketing program or education program, you might be in a cohort, and that's a group that's on track to graduate at the same time. So there's going to be like-minded folk taking the same classes, working together as partners, and so on. So here they're using decade generations as cohorts, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And then measures of time, right? So how long it's been. So from 1930 to 1980, it's been 50 years. So you can take a look at how this is broken down, and you can use this as a guide to help understand what's going in development. So say, for instance, you were born in 1930. Maybe you want to take a look at how you view politics in America in 1980. Okay, so then 50-year-olds versus 40-year-olds versus 30-year-olds versus 20-year-olds, and what their view is. Are they more Republican? Are they more Democrat? How do they vote? What issues are important, and so on? Do you see how that's working? How that time measure allows you to look at groups of people from the same area over a span of time. And that helps to understand the psychology of development, of aging, of location, of region, and so on. Okay, so studying ages, and this would be a cross-sectional study. Okay, so we're looking at one column would equal a cross-sectional study, what we were just talking about, right? 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s. And the control would be your time, and then the confounded variables be age and their cohort. Okay. Oh. So some advantages, it's cost effective, right? You can do all these people at one time. So you're in year 2000 or 1990 or 1980 or whatever it may be, and you look at these people right then and there. It's cost effective. It's easy to manage and it's time effective. It's quick. It's quick because you've got everybody right in front of you. You're doing it right now. Where do you stand right now? You don't have to wait on anything, okay? And those two go hand in hand, the cost effectiveness and the time effectiveness. Disadvantages, you can't assess the individual's development because you're not taking a look at how that person or that group of people have changed over time. You're looking at a snapshot of that group right now. Where are they? Okay. So you can't learn anything about the continuity of development. You can't make a theory or an assumption of saying, well, 20-year-olds typically start off here, and then over time they're going to end up at this point, making this decision, or etc. Okay, because you're only looking at right now. Okay, you can only make these assumptions, right? And you don't have much to stand on to do so when you're talking about cohort effects. You can't really say that, oh, if you were born in the 1930s, you're definitely this way because you didn't follow that group the whole way. You have to look back and say, well, what happened to these folks in those 70 years since their birth? And what seems or could be logical that has led them to be the way that they are, okay? So then you can take a look at it longitudinally, okay? And this would be going by rows, a longitudinal study. So controlled would be the cohort, and the compound would be time and age. So some advantages to this, taking a look at it from the cohort 50s all the way through maybe their lifespan. Same individuals, individual development. So you now do get to look at that group and the individuals inside it and say, man, these things impacted these groups of people like this. And you can make those strong assertions, okay? only way to answer stability versus instability. What are the things that are really weighing on them that create stability, makes them feel safe, grow, change, or instability that fractures, frays, and creates struggle? Okay. Disadvantages, very expensive. Think about this. Take a look at that 1950 group if we're running them from 1980 to 2010, right? So that's 40 years essentially that we would be running this study, and you've got to pay for stuff, right? Even if they're taking surveys, you still have to get postage and send it out to them and have research assistants and labs. It's expensive, very time consuming, right? This would, if you are planning on doing a study like this, this is your life's work. This is 40 years worth of data collection to be able to explain the developmental behavior, developmental psychology of a group of people. And it's difficult because maybe some of these people choose to opt out. Maybe some of them die. Maybe some of them move and forget to tell you where they went, so you lose contact with them, right? It's hard. Okay. And as you're going along, it's very possible that your focus may change. You may start talking about politics, but now you want to talk about socioeconomic status and how the money being brought into the families are changing the dynamic, which could completely change the focus of your work and your theory, and then you'd have to do some backtracking and it become very difficult. Okay. Like we said, dropouts and deaths. One thing to be aware of, longitudinal studies like this will get you most likely better data. Okay, more specific, detailed data. You'll have so much more information to be able to go off of. But they're harder and they're more expensive. Okay, so they don't get done as often. Okay, selective attrition, non-representative sample. Maybe by the time you're done, because people are dropping out, dying, choosing to not join, whatever, your sample is biased. You don't. Maybe you lose all of your women, or maybe you lose all of your, Hispanic Americans, whatever. Okay, and then practice test familiarity. Over time, people start to learn what it is that you want out of them. They're going to start to get a feel for what the theory is, for what you're trying to do. And a lot of times they'll answer your questions that way. So by doing this for 30, 40 years, you lose that authenticity, if you will. And then cross-generational problems, okay? You don't get the opportunity to see if this is the same issue for those that are born in different groups, because you're narrowing your focus only to that group. So you can't make the assumption of, oh, this is going to happen, all the people who were born in the 60s. You just can't do that because you haven't looked at them. Okay. So age difference, age changes, different perspective. Your cross-generational question would look something like this. Do 70-year-olds hold more conservative gender role attitudes than 30-year-olds because they're older, because they're members of a different cohort raised in a more traditional period? All right, so you can kind of see the cross-sectional aspect of, we're going to take a look at gender role attitudes across those different lines. A longitudinal question would look something like, are there responses in 2000 more liberal than in 1960 because gender role attitudes become more liberal with age, or because major societal changes occurred from one time to the next? So you see that blue line following that same group as they're aging. Okay. So a hybrid, right? Yeah, you can do that. It's not just one or the other. You can do that. You can take a look at, your cross-sectional and your longitudinal. Okay. So what can this do for you? It gives you age-related trends that are truly dependent on nature. Okay, and reflect how people, regardless of cohort, can be expected to change over time. So you get a little bit of the individual, you get a little bit of the whole group, and you can make those assertions now. You can talk about age effects. Right? You can talk about cohort effects. Age trends that differ from cohort to cohort. What's similar, what's different. Okay? And you talk about trends that suggest events during a specific time period that are similar, time measure effects. Okay? Because everybody went through X in 1980. Right? And you see how the study goes. You got your cross-sectional study going vertically, your longitudinal going kind of diagonally, and then you get that sequential age cohort. You're able to kind of make these assumptions of the people in those groups because of the other two that you're focusing on. Okay, so good methodology. So here's another way of looking at it. Okay, your cohort comparison. So here you are, 1991, 1993, 99, 2000, 2001. 8-year-olds to 10-year-olds to 12-year-olds, 6-year-olds to 8-year-olds to 10-year-olds. So you're looking at 2 different cohorts of when they were born at the same time, and then over time you're going to compare the 91s when they were 8 to the 93s when they were 8, the 91s when they were 10 to the 93s when they were 10. Okay, and you're following both of them over the whole time. So you see all 3: cohort comparison, cross-sectional comparison, and the longitudinal comparisons. So again, very involved, but a really good methodology. So now that we got that, let's start talking about how we actually develop.